for is Mike Jones. He is a security guard who walked into the room where a troubled man, had been shooting repeatedly at members of the school board in Panama City, Florida, and a lot of people are calling him a hero. He shot at Clay Duke, and then Clay Duke took his own life. And this has become such a big story. We wanted to take a closer look at Clay Duke, who he was before he made that fateful decision to go inside that school board meeting. Richard Louie has been looking into exactly what Duke was doing in the days before all of this happened. Richard?
Yeah, Chris, we're learning much more about Clay Duke. He led a very difficult life, as you've been talking about today. He was an ex-con who filed for bankruptcy while he was in prison. And then when he was released, he got psychiatric help and took his medication, says his lawyer. Now, this year, a judge then relieved Duke of his probation obligations after Duke told him he and his wife were out of work. His wife talks here about Duke's effort to bounce back.
He had changed. He'd been on medication. He had not been a problem to anyone. His records through prison, through his probation, through everything from being off, he was trying to get a second chance.
And also trying to get $500 or $600 a month in medical insurance. Duke suing the Social Security Administration. That's what he was trying to do, losing his appeal for that there, Chris, at least 5 times. And as a result, his lawyer says he could not afford his medicine for the bipolar disorder he was diagnosed with. And then, about a week ago, Duke joined Facebook. He posted stills of the movie V for Vendetta. That's a film about a masked man who fights against an evil government. That red V that we see in the video, so we've been covering that story that he made before killing himself, was a symbol from that movie. And then he also wrote this note on his Facebook page, quote, "Rich Republicans, rich Democrats, same, rich. They take turns fleecing us, our few dollars, pyramiding the wealth for themselves." And then, Chris, finally, he also wrote this: "Some people may say I was evil."
All right, Richard, thank you very much. And Patrick, Jamie, and Princella are back with us. And, you know, there are, as always happens in cases like this, questions being raised, Princella, about shouldn't somebody have seen something? Somebody should have known something. He obviously was someone who was troubled. You know, sadly, I don't know. There are a lot of troubled people out there, and you just don't always see this coming.
Yeah, Chris, that's exactly right. I mean, this is, you know, the country, quite frankly, we're on hard times, and everybody just can't deal. Clearly, the man had mental issues. I think there's something to be said. You know, I'm not an attorney, but something happened here. There's a disconnect between letting this man off probation or even letting him out of jail without some sort of assurance that he's going to be in some kind of mental counseling. I will say this. My father served on the school board for 20 years, and in most towns, school board meetings are open to the public, but I have always expressed and had a concern that these meetings are open usually with no security. Usually people just, it's kind of a go along to get along, and no one expects that these things happen. But really, there have been several violent incidences, maybe not to this degree, but of people who just get out of control at these public forums. So I really urge many of these small towns who just think, you know, everything's fine, we do this every day, you really probably need to get some security there, because you just never know who's coming to these meetings.
And obviously we're waiting for the security guard in this case to come out. A lot of people saying he's a hero. He went right in there.
He is.
But the other thing, Jamie and Patrick, that struck me as I watched all of this unfolding is, here you have a superintendent who's trying to talk to the guy. He says, keep me, let the other people go. You have a woman who is let go. She comes back with a purse, tries to knock the gun out of his hand.
Ginger Littleton.
Ginger, yeah. I talked to her yesterday, and, you know, she said it probably wasn't the smartest thing I've ever done, because when he knocked her down, he put the gun to her head. Incredible. But it never ceases to amaze me, the bravery.
Yeah.
And she did it because her friends were sitting there, and she thought they were in danger. She couldn't leave them there. The bravery and the calm of people under the most extraordinarily stressful situations.
No, I mean, I watched that video, and I thought the first thing I would have done was just duck under the desk.
Yeah.
And these guys, which they easily could have done.
They're trying to talk him down.
I mean, they're trying to talk him down. I think what's interesting is the Facebook angle of this. I mean, I'm from D.C., and we had an incident recently where a guy threatened to attack our metro system, and I think he was largely, the authorities were largely alerted by something he posted on Facebook. That's great. I think it's also it's going to present some interesting situations down the road because everybody talks on Facebook and says things either crazy or not crazy, and it's going to be very hard to separate something like this from just a guy who's just venting after he saw a movie. So, I mean, Facebook is a great resource in that regard, but how are we going to separate just a guy who had a bad day from stuff like this?
Yeah, especially if the shooter survives and it heads to trial. What is fascinating, as you point out, in every single one of these mass shooting cases, you have these incredible heroes like Mr. Jones, who we'll hear from shortly, like Ginger Littleton, who I saw your interview, amazing courage. They say, oh, I wasn't being courageous, I was just thinking of my friends, but these are American heroes in every single one of these stories. But we have too many of these stories. It's not just Florida. This is a nationwide epidemic, and this man had an aggravating stalking conviction, a criminal record, a history of mental illness. If it doesn't rise to insanity in a court of law, he certainly had a mental illness, and yet he had firearms. He had an extra magazine, and there he was firing at other American citizens who were unprotected. That's a problem. I know we have a right to bear arms, but we have to find a way to keep them out of the hands of those who are mentally unstable.
All right, Jamie, Patrick, Princella, thanks. And as we wait for the security guard to come to the microphone, the president is also going to be speaking.